Hi, Terry Michael, the Bible lady. It's not the end of the ride and the big deal about Bethany. That's what we're going to talk about today. It's been a wee bit since my last video, and I hope you all had a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It's been a wee bit, and currently we're in an unusual status regarding electoral votes for the president and runoff for senators in Georgia. This is 2021. Well, I heard this in my spirit this morning. It's not the end of the ride. That can be taken spiritually or regarding the current political status, right? So I am going to address the spiritual. What's the end of the ride there? In my last video, I told you about Jesus came to Bethany on the first day of the first month in the year that he was crucified. Well, what's the big deal about Bethany, arriving in Bethany? It's just a village, right, in Judea, about a half mile to 2 miles east of Jerusalem. But it's on the southeastern slope of the Mount of Olives. But there's much more. Bethany is rich, rich in history. That's where Mary, Martha, and their brother Lazarus lived. After Jesus gave instructions to the 70 and he sent them out, Martha received Jesus into her house. Luke 10:38-40 tells us. This was probably the smartest thing she ever did. Because even though Martha invited him in, her sister Mary doted on his every word and sat at his feet. Mary later anointed Jesus' feet with an ointment before his crucifixion. Now everybody knows about Lazarus, right? Lazarus was raised from the dead, but Jesus, it took him a while to get there. He waited 2 days, I believe, or to 4 days after he heard. And then he went to the town. And Martha was the first to run to Jesus when he arrived. As you read John 11:20-44, it tells you how Mary went to Jesus after Martha and Jesus' intense compassion for them. It's the place in the Bible that says Jesus wept. John 11:35. They journeyed to the cave covered by a stone. Sound familiar? Yes. In fact, the raising of Lazarus is a type of shadow of Jesus' resurrection. And you see, this all took place in this little town of Bethany. It's on the eastern slopes of the Mount of Olives. So that's also where Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7. Busy little place, right? Jesus sent his disciples to find a place for the Last Supper from the Mount of Olives, Matthew 21:1. And he spoke about the last days. Whoa, what they would be like when he was on the Mount of Olives, Matthew 24:3-51. The last thing, the Garden of Gethsemane, is in the Mount of Olives at the edge of Bethany. Jesus would leave the place where he gathered for the Last Supper and go and pray in the garden, Mark 14:26. Well, I said the last thing, but that's not the last thing. There were other things that happened. There was the double anointing because, as I said, Mary anointed his feet, right? 6 days before the Passover. But the second anointing was at the house of Simon the leper, and that's in Mark 14:3. This could have been Simon the leper, who was one of the 10 lepers who was healed. But this time, 2 days before his crucifixion, the woman who anointed Jesus is not identified. She anointed his head, and she could have been Mary's sister, Martha. She could have followed her sister's example from 4 days prior, right? Possibly, who knows? So there's another amazing occurrence in Bethany, and that's when he ascended into heaven 40 days after his resurrection. He gathered his 11 disciples to give them final instructions before he left the earth. And that's Luke 24:50-51. He took them to the Mount of Olives in the vicinity of Bethany, as it says in Luke 24:50. And he blessed them and commissioned them. And the Lord was then lifted into the clouds, Acts 1:9. He went from the promised land to our promised land above. And as the disciples stood staring upwards, 2 angels appeared to them. 2 angels, just like when the 2 angels at Jesus' tomb. But they said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who was taken from you into heaven, he will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. Whoa, that's Acts 1:11. What does that mean? Well, it means it's not the end of the ride. That's not the end of the ride. The ancient town of Bethany, insignificant as it seems, is going to be the scene of a world-changing event, the glorious return of Jesus Christ as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Bethany has the most exciting future prophesied. Zechariah 14:4 says, On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east. Bethany. When Jesus returns to set up his kingdom, it will be in the very place he left, as it says in Acts 1:11. So, we look at that. Jesus coming back in the same place he left. Wow. On the edge of Bethany, where he was lifted into heaven. Do you believe it? I think, of course, if you are a believer, you believe it. But I just wanted to share with you, no one is born a believer. We're not born believers. You become a believer by believing, right? Then you're born again, and you'll enter into the heavenly promised land, right? If you're not a believer yet, is that what you're saying? Well, to be one, all you have to do is confess, Lord, I believe, and confess it from your heart and speak it with your mouth. That's what Romans 10:9 and 10 says. Then, once you're a believer, you'll be transformed. For sure, you're going to want to be joined with Jesus for the end of the ride, right? Because that is the final end of the ride. By the way, I wanted to tell you, I'm putting these last videos together in a small publication, and I'll get that information to you later. Till next time, Terry Michael, the Bible Lady.